let's do a quick round of intros and then we can get into it, right? So starting with Andrew.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew. Started Kraken Inc., our L2 on the superchain, and with a heavy DeFi and liquidity focus.
Hey there. My name is Harry Kalodner. I'm one of the co-founders at Offchain Labs, and we are the core developers behind Arbitrum.
Hey y'all, I'm Ben Jones, one of the founders of Optimism. I don't have any musical instruments, but you might have seen me in the past on a little melodica action, so.
And I am Alex Gluchowski, the founder of ZK Sync. We're scaling Ethereum with zero knowledge proofs.
Okay, good intros. Let's start with this. All of you all have, L2s and taken very different paths to get there, different architecture, different go-to-market strategy, and especially different timings. So, starting with Andrew, let's talk about, in hindsight, what were some of the biggest wins and some of the biggest mistakes on your roadmaps?
That's hard. So, if I give kind of the backstory of why we chose the path we did a lot of weird experimentation and trying to run, all the stacks out there and see how Krakenites, internal, Kraken users responded to how we had an L2. Some of the mistakes we're trying to, and this is absolutely no offense to Offchain Labs, I'm so sorry, but some of the biggest mistakes were thinking that people would be able to latch onto a new programming language and use Rust or C as being able to make contracts. We only saw one person get really enthused by it, where we had a bunch of lawyers and other non-technical people writing Solidity contracts. So it kind of biased us towards okay, maybe we don't need that kind of feature. So then ultimately we went and ran a superchain and OP stack, and the rest has kind of been history. But I think one of the biggest learnings was that, and I'm I don't want to steal the question, but I am curious how Offchain Labs thinks about that. Yeah, I think that's kind of our journey of using all these different stacks, finding what works for internal Krakenites and what gets them excited, and realizing that there would be a lot of builders out there that would build the enthusiastic things that Krakenites want to build on chain.
Awesome. So I think let's see. We could start with mistake. I think that for me it's sort of just the amazing kind of the product discovery arc of Arbitrum, just in that the original idea of Arbitrum came around in 2014, and it wasn't until 2021 that there was a mainnet. And it wasn't until in 2022 that there was any degree of decentralization about it. And there were a lot of twists and turns on the way, which is kind of part of sort of building tech on the edge. Although also man, if we had gotten all of that done 3 or 4 years earlier, that would have been pretty amazing. In terms of on the positive side, I think kind of one of the biggest sort of things that we did right early on was kind of really lean into neutrality. I think that kind of the sort of picking winners invariably kind of reduces innovation in the market. If you're well, I don't even want to launch on that chain because there's already an anointed winner in that category, and then you kind of you tend to stifle innovation. Whereas Arbitrum from the beginning kind of was very builder friendly and sort of neutral and sort of open to all, and kind of that was a huge boon from the beginning.
I think to give the optimism mistake in a way that maybe some founders can resonate with and appreciate, I don't know if it's possible to truly learn it without just making the mistake, but have you ever seen the diagram of don't build a startup as the first wheel of the car, then the second wheel of the car, then the third, and then the rest of the car, but instead build a skateboard, then a scooter, then a bike? Does anyone know? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. That is the number one mistake to avoid, and we certainly made that mistake early on. So when we first, launched, the initial version of OP mainnet was built on this protocol we were building called the OVM, and we made kind of a lot of trade-offs in the OVM to try to hit every single product feature and functionality that we wanted. And ultimately, what that boiled down to was technical debt that we needed to bail out. And so that gets us to the best thing that we did, which was bail out a lot of that tech debt, delete a vast swath of the code base a number of years ago, and kind of rewrite it all from first principles. So Anyway, I'll try to turn the question into some startup advice. Internalize that scooter to bicycle to car thing. Don't go straight to the car. Bad idea.
So I generally agree with this as a rule, but the biggest mistake for us, I think, is the opposite, is an exception from this rule. Like, it's not going for the big picture in the beginning, because we were underestimating the progress we will be able to make with zero-knowledge proof protocols. And we thought that doing like a full generalized proving of arbitrary Turing-complete applications is not going to be possible, so we need a specialized language, we need then a specialized VM. So we went into the development of our own language first, and then we went into development of Era VM instead of doing like EVM bytecode optimizations, which were not possible back then, but became possible short after. So we launched Era in EVM compatible mode, not in EVM equivalent mode, which severely hampered the adoption of Era back in the day. Maybe we should have waited a little bit and just like launched straight with EVM equivalents. But there were a couple of things that came out of this, which I think are to the benefit of the entire space. So one is the Solx compiler that is the first ever LLVM compiler with EVM output, which is already outperforming Sol-C. It's in like in place replacement for Sol-C. You can just replace Sol-C with Solx. It works. Optimizes gas without having to do inline assemblies, without like sacrificing security, and also gets rid of the stack to deep problem. So now you don't have to run into stack to deep anymore. Like it just works. And was the second question about the biggest wins?
Yes.
Two points here. So like on the flip side of this like fast track of technology innovation, we really underestimated how fast we will be able to do this. And just 5 minutes ago, we made a really big announcement. We're introducing Airbender, the world's fastest open source ZK VM in RISC-V, which outperforms everything by like large margin. And what you can do now with it is you can prove Ethereum in almost real time on your home machine with just a single GPU. So anyone with a big single GPU can now do home proving. So like this opens the like whole bunch of possibilities for the world of ZK. It opens ZK abundance. We have hundreds of millions of GPUs in households around the world. So we can do now absolutely crazy things. So I encourage you to check it out on ZK Sync Twitter. Read more.
Okay, great, thanks. So, I mean, between timing and you should build the skateboard and you should build the car, I think it just shows that building an L2 is just very hard to do. And at least you all have learned from the mistakes and the wins along the way. I wanted to double click on the GPUs. You can prove an Ethereum block 12 seconds for what percent of blocks?
You don't prove it in 12 seconds here. It takes an average block is being proven on a single H100 GPU in under 35 seconds. Like,
okay.
And like so basically, I don't know what percentage it is, but like that's the median block. Now, I think most blocks, like something like 90%, what we've seen, what I saw in these benchmarks are proven under 1 minute, but that's on a single GPU. So if you take just a few of them, you don't even need to build a full cluster. With a few GPUs, you can do real-time proving, and with a bit more, you can do like almost instant proving. So what this enables for cross-chain UX, for the prover usability is just like absolutely next level. So we will be sharing more over the couple of days, like expanding on what this means. But this is the breakthrough the entire Ethereum community has been waiting for a very, very long time.
Okay, interesting, parallelizable. Okay, so once I was at a Permissionless event, and I heard a Flashbots talk 20 minutes ago, mentioned that 30 to 50% of transactions on L2s are spam. Do you all have any thoughts on that? Maybe we start with Harry.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of generally that's just a function of block space being cheap. Like it's kind of relatively fundamental to the system that if it's cheap enough to take up space, then you need barely any marginal utility from it in order to do so. I mean, this is kind of like if you look at email, like email spam is the same way. Like, yeah, your inbox is probably getting a hell of a lot more spam than it is actually legitimate messages most of the time. And like this is essentially why kind of capacity, like why pricing is so important, why kind of like properly configuring like, chain, gas limits is important, because the system should be agnostic to the actual usage. Now, there are ways that kind of incentivize or de-incentivize spam and kind of can lower the marginal utility of spamming the chain in various ways, of things like backrunning. And so it's definitely a problem that can be optimized. But fundamentally, if block space is available, there should be a general assumption that like probably there's something somebody can do with it that generates some value for them.
Okay, so I'm coming with a different kind of question now. And Ben, you might be the perfect person to answer this. So are ETH L2s parasitic? And I want it from the perspective of, Ethereum is talking about scaling the L1 now. They're talking about reducing, block times. They're talking about increasing the gas limit. If Ethereum does that hurt L2s? So can you answer it from that perspective?
No, next question. I think obviously this is a very hot narrative right now, and maybe over the better part of the last year. I would say a couple of things. The first thing that I would remind everyone of is that every competitor, if it is not true that L2s are parasitic, it is in every competitor to Ethereum's interest to promote the narrative that they are parasitic and just cast doubt and chaos into the Ethereum community. So I think we do need to be mindful as a community of developing the right antibodies to determine what of these arguments are good faith arguments and what of them are motivated for other reasons. Fundamentally, obviously there is a relationship between L1 and L2. It's not the same thing as L1 is L2, right? Like obviously it's not that simple, or all of our lives up here would have been a lot easier, and what would we have been doing for the past 5 years? It's also not the case that we're completely isolated and different. A majority of the revenues that flow through all of the networks up on this stage end up burning ETH by being posted as for data availability. So the answer is clearly more nuanced than one or the other. These are complementary products. One uses the other and the other uses the one. In fact, that goes bidirectionally. We use ETH for data availability. So there's an arrow going up from the L2 to the L1. We use ETH on the L2s, so there's an arrow from the ETH down to the L2s. We can have a separate discussion about whether L1 goes above or below L2s. This is a whole separate, this has been on our minds for years as protocol researchers, I'm sure. But ultimately what I would say is that it is very clear to me, as somebody who's been on a lot of panels with these lovely folks, been working on scaling Ethereum for a very long time along with these folks, that there is something more complex here than us all being some dirty parasites that are going to take the bags of ETH, or that ETH is going to take the bags of by scaling. I think that's just kind of an absurd premise. The reality is that there's nuanced economic relationships, and mutual value needs to be provided between L1s and L2s, and that needs to continue being true. So anyway, I hope that's a start of an answer. First step is don't believe the FUD. Second step is don't oversimplify, guys. It's a complex relationship.
That is a start of an answer, and I knew you would be one of the best people to access to. You mentioned that a lot of the ETH that's used on the L2s are burned. I mean, I look at charts on Blockworks research, and I see L2s have generally a gross margin of somewhere between 60% and 90%, depending on the L2. And then you mentioned there should be a blend. It's a relationship. It's not as black and white as if it's parasitic or not. 80% margins the correct blend?
I mean, what are the correct margins is like a very deep philosophical question across every layer of the stack, from layer 0 to layer 1 to layer 2 to the apps on top to the deal flow, order flow, MEV stuff we just saw in the last presentation to the front ends reselling. So that's a really deep question. Is that number right? Probably not. There's an infinite number of numbers, and that's just one of them. So I doubt it. But it is the case that we need to be having these conversations. I think the conversations that we need to be having between L1s and L2s are, what are the decentralization norms that L2s need to follow? What are the things that L1 needs to hold the L2s accountable to in terms of things like, ranging from using ETH in monetary policy to just like, what are the decentralization levels that are acceptable or not? And what L1 needs to continue to do is to continue scaling. Because to be super clear, if L1 stops scaling data availability and L2s keep accelerating and the price of data keeps going up because blobs get congested, that's a failure mode for everyone involved. And if you look at that and say, oh, well, the ether burn is going to go way up, I think that's an incredibly short-sighted view into the future of our networks.
Thanks, Ben. Alex, this one is for you. We look at the percentage, there's these trustless bridges between L1 and these L2s, right, most of the time. And the whole point is to be able to expand the utility of ETH, whether it's DeFi and other applications. Present day, there are more ETH in ETFs than there are ETH in L2s. All of the L2s combined, there's more ETH in ETFs. How do we change that?
I think the reason for this is that it's different markets, and you have people with access to these legacy technologies that can only use ETFs, and they can only purchase ETFs with the means they have. So the natural way to solve this is to enable basically tokenize all stocks and all exchange traded products, so that these ETFs themselves become tokens and everything goes on chain. And this is the original promise of blockchains. I deeply believe, it's absolutely clear to me that in a couple of years this is going to be the case. Every single asset of value, everything that represents value in any form, will go and become a Web3 product, like Web3 token in some form. Some of it will be permissionless, fully permissionless. Some of will have some KYC. Some will be in the middle. But it's all going to be digitized, and it's all going to be connected in this single global internet of value. This might sound like a beaten formula that we just keep repeating for many years, but this is true. This is the essence of what we're building. Blockchains, the Web3, is just the continuation of the evolution of the internet. What the internet has done to information, the blockchains will do to the world of value. So the faster this happens, the faster we'll get to the world where you will not need this boomer wrappers around the real thing, which is going to be the tokens. And we're working on this. We see extreme interest and seriousness from financial institutions this year. So the ZK Sync in particular is having massive success, massive demand inbound from institutions. We're doing pilots. We're working with banks. We had Deutsche Bank launched a chain on with ZK Sync stack on the Elastic Network. We're speaking to governments, sovereign nation states, sovereign funds, financial institutions of all kinds, fintechs and so on. All of them are doing this. We have tokenized RWAs on ZK Sync alone. It's the second largest ecosystem of RWAs with $2 billion worth of assets, second only to Ethereum with I think $6 billion. And it's only going to go up from here with the regulations, with the Genius Act being passed, with the Digital Assets Market Structure Act being in the works and likely be passed this year, with the US administration being so pro-business and pro-crypto. This is going to be probably the next really big thing that's happening in blockchains in general.
Thanks, Alex. I tend to agree. Does anybody else disagree that that's the path forward?
Sounds like all I'm hearing is that ETFs are parasitic to L1, man.
I mean, I've heard this a lot at Kraken from some of our BD and some of the more institutional-minded people, is that ETF investment will just keep going up before we have some kind of inflection point where it might go to the world that you're saying. Yes, we all believe in it and say that, yes, Web3 is a continuation of the internet and everything will be tokenized and we have this vehicle to be able to use these things. But it might just be at the end of the day, a generational gap. ETFs that's going to continue to be the easiest thing for people to just buy into. So I think it depends on your perspective, but it's almost to the Web3 native, it's a little bit more of a pessimistic view where that is just going to keep going up for the generational gap before we have some point where it goes back down.
The other thing to throw in on this is maybe this kind of fundamental separation between ETH and generally cryptocurrencies as capital assets and as things with utility. And to me, kind of the current state of the market where there is so much value in ETFs is essentially a failure of us yet to really sort of motivate the utility of interacting with like, hey, Ethereum's not just Bitcoin. It's not just sort of like, hey, all it is a capital asset. It provides this massive layer of utility. And like, that's kind of like this, when you see value flowing into Ethereum, kind of it's on the promise of sort of, it's built on this, but it's not actually yet taking advantage of it at kind of the core chain level. And everything Alex is saying makes me incredibly bullish that this is a trend that's really changing.
Okay, thanks for that. I heard ETFs are parasitic to ETH, so I guess
You heard it here first, folks.
so Bitcoin ETFs.
Coming to a Solana timeline near you.
Okay, Andrew. This is a hypothetical. Doesn't have anything to do with where you work, but we see chains like Base and Binance and OKX and WonderFi and I can go on. They launch these L2s. Do you think that this is a good idea? Do you think it's like them cannibalizing themselves? Do you think it's them seeing where the puck is going and skating there? And follow up, more importantly, again, nothing to do with where you work, should they have tokens?
Yeah. Is it parasitic or is it vampiric to the? Yes, and I think that these businesses should, for lack of a better way of putting it, kill themselves, right? Like figure out a way to go to where the puck is going and not be worried about vampiring your existing products. And that's kind of like our thesis in this kind of like rebellious, like on-chain side of the Kraken side, is that we should start hybridizing all of our products and make sure that they have an on-chain component to it. Because if like we're talking about with like ETFs and Web3, just like tokenizing everything in the world, then that is where it's going. So like we need to make sure that our core business can evolve to that beyond like just being a centralized exchange for trading and buying and selling. But as far as like the L2s go, from the centralized perspective, it's nice to have your own L2 because if we're focusing on liquidity, we have like all these very loyal clients, institutions using our platform. We want to bridge that liquidity onto the the centralized liquidity onto the on-chain world, and then like for other people doing exactly the same. So you mentioned like Binance and Coinbase. I think the era of like a general purpose, like come deploy everything on the chain is probably at like an end, and people have to focus a little bit more on what's the specialty. And so for centralized exchanges, it's definitely liquidity. It's your loyal clients. It's your order flow. It's maybe borrow, lend, whatever it is. It's like you have to find like that niche, and maybe like 1 to 2 years from now, to just like deploy everything is going to be more concentrated on the L1, and then like every L2 just kind of has their core like foundational protocols, and that's like what the value prop is.
Okay, thanks. And what about from the opposite side? What about vertical expansion, getting into like stocks, tokenized stocks, getting into like these other verticals? What are your thoughts on that?
Like thoughts on just tokenized stocks in general?
On other verticals?
Yeah, like we recently announced at Kraken a partnership with X stocks, and so like much like we were talking about earlier with the ETFs and all like everything tokenized, this is a huge internal conflict for me because coming as like a crypto native, it's like I don't really want to integrate with the existing financial world, but that's what people want, so that's what we're going to build and bring, and it actually is kind of fun, like obviously holding like a fraction of Tesla or something like that and doing some weird leveraged Ponzi thing with like a traditional stock. So we are focusing on equities for the remainder of the year at Kraken and also on Inc. But this is kind of cheesy, but the like tokenizing your mortgage, I've woken up a few times and had like my mortgage moved from one bank to another without like being asked. It's just like, hey, congrats, you have like a new like loan holder for your mortgage. I'd love to see some kind of like chain of that and like some kind of tokenized representation of that. So I know like what banks had it before and like what the decision was, like why did they sell my debt to someone else? Yeah, I think we'll continue to lean into all kinds of RWAs beyond just like this equities launch that we're doing on June 30th.
Okay, great. Sorry, did you say what your thoughts were on tokens for L2s from centralized exchanges?
Token? Oh, sorry.
Do they need a token?
Okay, Inc. recently did a token announcement from the Inc. Foundation, and so do exchanges need it? Hell yeah, they do. Like you can have so much like fun with it where if you have this centralized entity and you have a foundation that's completely independent that's making a token, then you could integrate, you could do all kinds of fun things with it, right? It's just like, how do I enable this in all of our products? If you have a card, maybe give some like rewards back in this token, have fee discounts or something like that. There's so much creativity that I think a lot of people think of with a token. It's not really like the ICO era or even before that, where it's just like boring governance at the end of the day. When you have that centralized backing or an existing business that's launching an L2, there's so much cool like incentives and like creativity that you can do on your existing centralized business next to the token.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
I did not ask when token, I asked a hypothetical. Harry, some people say, not me, some people say that, Arbitrum is, it's winning the TVL game, it was one of the first L2s, but it's kind of boring, there's no memes, there's no innovation. Some people, right? So what do you think, like, if you had God power, or if you could influence governance, or, some kind of way, how do you, prevent Arbitrum from becoming the Ethereum of L2s? Like dominant, but slow moving.
I mean, the Ethereum of L2s sounds pretty good because, I'm kind of an ETH maxi, so I don't know if that's necessarily, but no, I mean, it is kind of funny in that, like, being sort of the older a project gets in crypto, the less it has that sort of new project shine, that promise of, well, I mean, just, in general, I mean, the biggest inflection point for any project is before and after you launch, because before the launch, it's gonna be perfect and create endless opportunity and be magic. After the launch, it's a real thing that people are using and interacting with. And I think kind of, it's interesting the way these cycles go and kind of the degree to which sort of the crypto Twitter meta doesn't necessarily match up with like real users and real value being created. I think like there's a meme going around of like Arbitrum is just the hyperliquid bridge. And then you like look at the numbers and you're like, well, yeah, but there's like a lot of people who make a lot of money on Hyperliquid and then bridge it back to Arbitrum and are like using all sorts of DeFi protocols on Arbitrum. Like I think kind of the sort of reality of the kind of like liveliness of the ecosystem is sort of out of whack with kind of like the image. And I think a lot of that is kind of like Arbitrum, like to a significant degree, was not like very active during meme coin season. Obviously that was kind of a big deal. And like, I think a lot of that from my perspective is sort of a value for fairness. Like Arbitrum is optimized and built to be fair to users, to optimize for user experience. That tends to not be as fun as an exploitative casino that like some people hope to get rich, but also everybody loses a lot of money. It is more boring, but like in the long run, kind of where do people keep coming back to? Where do people find the most value? I think is sort of what lasts across multiple cycles versus blowing up in a cycle and burning out.
Fair, safe and steady.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Just on the premise of the question, I just want to call out, we should all look forward to and celebrate the moments in which L2s are not pitching themselves as the innovative, hot new differentiator X, Y, Z. The goal of everybody on this stage in many ways is to disappear and let people cook and just make them think that they're using the internet. So anyway, I appreciate your answer. I appreciate where the question's coming from. I also just want to call out that like the end is in sight and we should be excited when the headlines stop dropping so frequently and we stop seeing so much crazy differentiation, innovation, because that needs to happen at higher levels of the stack.
Love that. You're teeing me up for my next question. And it's for both you, Ben and Alex. And to summarize the question, it's basically interop. Like, when are we going to get it? I know there's different angles here. There's different approaches between the superchain and the Elastic Net. When are we going to get it? When are we going to get this account abstraction, pay master, user doesn't know they're on a chain, yeah, and how? And, feel free to argue amongst yourselves. Start with you, Ben.
I mean, there's no one silver bullet here. There's not going to be one moment in time in which L2s go from horrible and fragmented to use to magical and effortless, and you don't even know that it's not the same as a website. it's going to be a slow and steady set of improvements. I think we'll have significant jumps, very significant jumps at different points in time. And as developers catch up to those jumps being available as tools to actually putting them into front ends, we'll see that continue to evolve. So there's no one silver bullet here. There are a lot of awesome features that we need to build out in tandem. We need account abstraction. We need things like intents. We need lower level native interoperability between chains to increase the efficiency of those intents. So it's not one size fits all. One solution solves everything. There's a few pieces that have to fall in place, and we're getting real close. To speak a little bit about the optimism in the superchain, one of our big focuses right now is protocol level interoperability. And so basically what this means is you want to give a much stronger guarantee to users and to developers than you can provide with a third-party bridge. So third-party bridges kind of fill this role today of allowing you to move assets between ecosystems. They come with cost trade-offs, and they really come with decentralization trade-offs and security trade-offs. So what we're building right now for the OP stack, the big focus, if you want to know timelines, check out our entirely open source public GitHub page, which will show you all of the milestones that need to be completed, so you don't have to believe me saying soon TM. But that's what we're focused on building right now. And that will basically take the incredible chains in the superchain and allow them to move assets in a way that is fungible, meaning there's no slippage. You don't have to convert between asset of one type to asset of the other type. You can just move it over there. And it means on top, you can build applications that treat instances on multiple chains as one big instance without sacrificing on security, because those instances can pass messages and data and update their state in a way that doesn't encroach on the security assumptions that already exist. So it's not going to be everything. There's a little bit of what we're doing with superchain interop. All the pieces have to come together to really see the story to completion.
Thanks. Alex?
So I'll start by saying that there is a slight misconception about the interop. The interop sounds like something that you can just we have these different chains, let's just connect them. Let's just build a bridge. Let's just build this line that nicely connects them. This is a very, very flawed analogy. The way you should be thinking about this is it's a holistic system. If you don't design it from the beginning for this internal cohesiveness, you might not necessarily be able to add it. A very the very imperfect example I can bring in now is if you're building petrol cars and I'm building electric cars, and we have different networks, you have your gas stations and I have my electric grid to power the cars. Can we just have an interop? Can you just plug your diesel to my Tesla supercharger and just drive? You can't, right? If we have both electric cars, then maybe you can do a converter. If you don't design for the same standard of the charger, it's still going to be difficult, but maybe you have an adapter that you can do this, right? But if it's a completely different system, so operating on different principles, it might not be possible at all, or very, very difficult, or requires some hybrid solutions. This is roughly how it is in reality. It's going to be very difficult to connect optimistic rollups to ZK rollups. It's going to be a lot easier to connect ZK rollups to other ZK rollups. And within a single ZK rollup ecosystem, think ZK Sync, Elastic Network, you will be able to build this into the interop that is almost basically perfectly seamless, with the caveat it's going to be asynchronous, but really fast, thanks to super fast provers on a single GPU, which we just announced today with ZK Sync Airbender. Check it out, the announcement, ZK Sync, Twitter. Because with proofs so fast, what you can do is you can be proving blocks that you generate. You will have very fast blocks. Every 100 milliseconds, we'll have a block. Right now, I think the upgrade is coming to the next version of ZK Sync Stack. 100 millisecond blocks. You can start immediately proving it. Prove it in under 1 second. Seal the block. Commit it to the interop layer, and then you have this you do one click and you connect to any app and you do any action. Now, not just sending messages or reading state or logs. You can literally do any action, any token, fungible, non-fungible. It's completely transparent. asynchronous. So you have to wait this 1 second, and like you cannot do flash loan across different chains. But you can just connect to Uniswap or whatever, do a swap, and within 2 seconds it will return with whatever token you want to have. And in this scenario, you still, like, every chain will have their own sovereignty, their own freedom, their own customizations. So like some of them will be Validium, so you need to think about security of that chains, etc. But you will not need to think about the interfacing. Just like when you go to different websites, on some of them you would not put your credit card because you don't trust the website. But it's a standard process to pay. Like if you trust the website, this is how you do it. You just connect, you like go to Stripe, enter the card number, and it works. And or like you want to go through a hyperlink, you do one click, and the browser does everything for you magically, and the new page opens. This is how it's going to feel, and it's going to feel this year. I promise you.
Well, with that enthusiasm, I believe it. So you're saying electric vehicles, the petrol vehicles, not good. Maybe you need an adapter. You're saying ZK is the adapter, correct? Okay.
Yeah, ZK is not the adapter. ZK is the core engine, the technology. The electric cars versus petrol cars, gas cars.
And so
Ethereum is now like a steamer, right? Like optimistic rollups for the first generation of engines, and ZK rollups is the second generation of whatever. Yeah,
got you.
I mean, like I don't share what Ben has said that our goal is to disappear and the end is near. That sounded like
Ominous.
But Ben,
we think
ZK is the adapter. ZK is
the end game.
Part of the superchain interrupt standards.
Yeah, I mean, look, ZK is going to be awesome for a lot of use cases. There's a reason that we built the OP stack to be proof agnostic. So there are ZK proven OP chains, there are optimistic OP chains, and they're both running in prods on mainnet today. So I super agree. I think where we might differ, Alex, because truth be told, the interoperability protocols we're building are very, very similar. I think maybe where we would differ is in some of the semantics of what is a chain versus what is a bridge and this kind of thing. But ultimately, they are very similar stories. And I think you made me think of one thing that I did not put on my list, which is a very good nerd snipe if there are developers in the crowd that you reminded me of, Alex, which is asynchronous Solidity programming. Asynchronous promises and async await, and these things are very, very, very common tools that developers use in Web 2 all the time. Go do some JavaScript with an RPC call or whatever. We are about to have to reintroduce this asynchronous concept into the world of Solidity, and I have been having the most fun I've had in years looking at Solidity, trying to figure out the right patterns for these libraries. So shout out to asynchronous programming for Solidity. It's going to be a hot topic. Come check out all the GitHubs if you're a dev in the crowd that sounds interesting too, because it is very cool.
We already see some examples of this with Intense, for example. It's asynchronous, but it's best. The one click, single confirmation, everything just works. What the asynchronicity is hidden, abstracted away from the user. So it does not need to be messy. But yes, it's going to be different. It's not what we got used to.
Crosschain.then, who would have thought?
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Harry?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add in one kind of like, at least, and Ben can feel free to disagree, but like distinction, I think where he and I probably agree and feel a little differently than Alex is like the idea of kind of like ZK being the engine. Like from my point of view, ZK is the type of lock on the car door that fundamentally kind of the fundamental of the chain from my perspective is sort of the actual execution of the chain. And which is, why what you were saying in terms of like, hey, you can plug in a ZK proof. Like I would view and like, I think kind of Optimism's clearly working on this for Arbitrum. We're working on building out support for ZK proving as well. Like it's not, from my perspective, essentially it's an awesome technical innovation, but it's not like a kind of fundamental property of the stack as much as kind of tech that can be composed.
Like if you look in the announcement, it's one very interesting thing is that the fact that we can prove Ethereum on a single GPU stems from the fact that we're using the ZK native execution environment for this. We're not proving Wrath or like any legacy stack. The stack, the execution environment, the prover, the virtual machine, and the GPU accelerator were all co-developed as like a full vertical integration thing. This is what enabled this leap, like from 160 machines down to one. Like the previous existing setup for real-time proving required like 160 machines, maybe 50 machines if you're like under like 50% of the proving stack, or like 50% of the proofs. To get to one, you really need to rethink the whole stack. Like the tree implementation is very different. Like a bunch of things. So it might be difficult to like add it in hindsight afterwards.
Hey guys, love the spice. We're coming up on time there. Luckily, there's no talk after, but I'm going to do a quick, I had a lot of lightning round questions, but I'm only going to do one quick one because we're really out of time. If the need arises, i.e. your chain becomes very bottlenecked, will you use another DA layer besides Ethereum? Start with Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yeah.
Yeah.
Like if we are bottleneck, we'll go to a different, like we kind of got like really biased early on and we just wanted to, use Ethereum as the DA, but if the need arises, yeah, we would switch instantly.
Yeah, thanks for the honesty. Harry?
Not my call, but like since Arbitrum, if we're talking about Arbitrum once it's owned by the DAO, I would very much hope that it would never move away from Ethereum for data availability. But the Arbitrum stack itself already supports tons of different data availability options, and we love the exploration. And there are a lot of Orbit chains that are using all sorts of different DA.
Lovely. Ben?
Yeah, same exact story here.
Same for us. We're building a stack that many chains use, and some of them use different approaches.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for your time. I know the questions are spicy as all love. Thank you. Give it up.
Thank you.